everybody. Hope you're having a good day today. We have another opportunity to do something for God today, so let's take advantage of that and figure out what we can do. And yes, we can pay attention to what's going on around us and learn things from it, or we can just stick our heads in the sand. And I prefer that we don't do that. Now, the title of the lesson is called Slowly Changing the Church. And while the true church of Christ has not changed over the years, we find that many congregations of God's people, they have changed over the years. And yes, some of these changes were necessary to get to the truth, but sadly, a lot of congregations are leaving the truth for other things. And so we're going to notice this, and we've seen this take place over quite a few years. See, those of us who have been around for a while have noticed some changes that have taken place in our congregations. And sure, these changes have been subtle and almost unnoticeable. And we take caution not to change things in church or its worship service. And because we know that God does not change, Malachi 3 and verse 6 tells us that. And we know the word of the Lord will abide forever, Isaiah 40 and verse 8. And so there are some things that should never change, yet they do all the time. And of course, we know people do not like change, but yet when they find out how advantageous it is for them to change, then they usually do. Some of us old fogies seem to be a little slow in making changes, but eventually we do. See, everything we do in life transforms and changes the way we do things. See, I remember once I had to sit in the hallway to talk on the telephone. You know, that is where the phone was plugged into the wall. And now we carry our phones around with us and use wireless handsets and talk on the phone while doing our chores around the house or actually anywhere else. Wherever we go, we have instant communication with people not only in our neighborhood, but around the world. And so that has changed through technology. And so I'm sure some of us will remember when there were only 3 or 4 channels that we could get on our TV sets. And remember when most TVs were black and white. Now we have TVs, movies, and concerts streamed onto any electronic device, and we can watch them whenever we want and not be at the mercy of the broadcast station. I mean, you can go right now if you want to see the movie It's a Wonderful Life. You don't have to check the TV guide or see when it's coming on later on. You can just pop it in there, say, show me that, and you can play it right now if you want to. So, yeah, I mean, things like that happen. All right, and so there's much of our world has changed that only a few of the younger folk have no idea what it means to see change. And see my grandkids, that they can operate any electronic device in their home. And I'm still trying to figure out how to use my cell phone. How many of you have said that? Some of us old fogey, yeah, we've said that quite often. And we're amazed. Sometimes we're trying to figure out, we have to go to the grandkids, hey, how do I do this? Or why does my phone do that? And then they'll explain it to you. And I'm not talking about your teenage grandchildren. I'm talking about your little toddler grandchildren can explain that stuff to you. So I'm sure many of us feel that way. Now, as much as we want to keep change out of the church, as we understand God doesn't change, Christ doesn't change, the church should not change, we have to face the reality that things have changed a great deal. See, our challenge is not to let these changes hurt our souls. And that's where I fear many are not noticing. They're not paying attention to that. In many congregations, it is actually doing that because of the changes that have already taken place and the changes that certain, what we call change agents, want to take place are being forced down the rest of the groups. There's different elements in the church where these people call themselves change agents. What they're trying to do is get the church to become just like a denomination and to actually become a denomination. And some people, they don't like it, but the the change agents, they kind of push it, and so people either leave that group and start another group, or they just kind of sit back and go along with it. And so changes have taken place in a lot of congregations. And so some Christians who are trying to remain faithful are seeing these changes that have hurt the church in recent years. I mean, years ago, it would have been unthinkable to hear about a congregation using instrumental music in their worship service. But now more and more are doing it. It would be unthinkable to hear of a Church of Christ having women preachers, and more are doing that. A lot of churches now have what we call councils that made up of men and women, married men and women, singles and young people, to make the decisions as elders would do. And so, yeah, there's a lot of changes that are taking place in a lot of places. And so those of us who haven't fit in with the times, basically we're considered the old fogies and out of touch, and all these other ones think, well, hey, they're in the mainstream. So here's the point. See, I remember the days when members of the Church of Christ had a reputation for knowing their Bibles better than anyone else from any other religious group. We cannot say that anymore. Honestly, we cannot say that anymore. Bible illiteracy is so common that people are not even embarrassed they do not know their Bibles anymore. I mean, probably half of your congregation couldn't actually tell you what's the plan of salvation. Half of your congregation probably couldn't do it. And you know what? They don't care. They just sit there and they just come to church and visit with their friends and listen to endure the preacher probably, but still do that. And they don't know their Bibles anymore. I was talking to one lady one time and mentioned something about Samson. And she just kind of gave me that blank stare and kind of shook her head and said, "Who are you talking about?" I mean, and she had pretty much grown up in the church, but she never heard the story of Samson. I mean, so there's a lot of Bible illiteracy, and people are not learning the Bible. In fact, people who know their Bibles are actually very rare in a lot of congregations. And remember, gospel meetings used to be quite common. And yes, we had purpose for the gospel meetings, and it was to get the message out to people and give them opportunities to come during the week instead of on Sunday. And we used to invite people and have a lot of success with that. But notice that has changed a lot. We do not, excuse me, I'm losing my voice. We do not have as many as we used to have. A lot of congregations think, well, nobody attends these anymore, so why have them? And our gospel meetings would run a week long when I was growing up. The prior generation before me, they had sometimes 2-week meetings, and if it was successful, they might extend it a week or even longer. And now it just seems that many have just adopted a weekend meeting, maybe once or twice a year, or just a little 3-day meeting. And so why is that? Well, because people don't want to come. They're too tired. And a lot of times eldership, they don't care about their congregation to know that their congregation is lacking in spiritual knowledge, but yet if they start pushing longer meetings, they're going to get an earful from the members. We don't like this. This takes too much of our time and stuff. I mean, you can list the reason, and you can just ask any elder what they've heard, and I'm sure they could tell you quite an earful. See, we know that our culture and society have a definite impact upon the church. See, our world is entertainment driven and motivated by greed and sex, and it is not unusual anymore that this does not cause church leadership to seek ways to please or entertain the crowds. See, they are almost forced to do this entertainment because they feel they might lose members or young people if they do not change. Oh, we got to change with the times. And of course, the changes that are made are not sticking with the truth. That's the problem. And so remember that years ago, the preaching of the gospel was all we needed to bring people to the Lord. Not only the preaching of the gospel, but the invitation and the care that the members had for their friends and their neighbors, their co-workers. And it used to be quite common. We'd have visitors come because they were invited by their friend, and maybe their friend had been studying with them, and they were ready to obey the gospel. We used to see that quite common. Now, I mean, there's some baptistries that haven't seen any motion in the water for a long time. And so, I mean, it's almost getting depressing. But see, now most of our members believe that we cannot attract anyone by pure gospel preaching. Okay, that's a problem. See, we must offer incentives of food or frolic and fun to bring people in. And yes, many of the denominations were doing this long before we started, but some of our leadership wanted to be like the nations around them. They saw this denominational group or that denominational group have lots of cars in their parking lot, and well, what are we going to do to get those people to start coming here? Well, they go over there, find out what they're doing. Yeah, entertainment, fun, food, and frolic. Well, then let's do that, and we'll get these people in here. And so, you remember how Samuel thought it disrespectful to God when the people wanted a king to rule over them? The people wanted to be like the nations around them. And Samuel warned, hey, this is not going to be good for you. I mean, our God is our king, and we shouldn't want anything else. But yet eventually the people won out. God even gave in to them, said, let them have their king. They're not going to like it, but let them have their king. And so we see that in the churches today. Leadership is making changes that sometimes the members, they don't like. I mean, they've actually gotten to the point where a lot of leadership made the changes regardless of how the people felt. And guess what? Part of the congregation left because they weren't willing to endure the changes that were taking place. And for most of us, even those of us who are trying to be faithful and true to the Lord's way of doing things, there have been little changes that have taken place. It's been so subtle that we barely noticed it happen. You just have to really just take a look back. Now, what did we do 10 years ago? Why are things different from 10 years ago and 20 years and 30 years ago? I mean, so we can barely notice the changes. Well, it's just like yourself. Let's say you decide to start losing weight, and you lose a little bit here and a little bit there, and really nobody notices, but someone who hasn't seen you in a while, hey, you've lost weight. And so, yeah, I mean, about the only people who recognize the changes that are taking place in the church are probably those who left the church and sometime returned sometime later. And so what they find in a lot of our churches is different from what they left. And we have to acknowledge that and understand that. A lot of our congregations are very much elderly. The old-time congregations that have been around for a while, they're basically in an elderly state. Very few young people there. Because the young people like to congregate with young people. They like to be around their own. And they don't want to be hanging around a bunch of old fogies. I mean, so that's the reality. Now, some congregations have a good mixture, and the young people have learned to listen to the wisdom of the older ones. And they turn out just fine. But a lot of times, the old ones, they're not willing to give out their wisdom. And so the young, they're just not satisfied there. And so we see a lot of congregations that are very strong and vibrant, a lot of young people. And the reason is because all the young people have left the older congregations. And so really a lot of older congregations just had to close their doors because they couldn't draw anybody in. And their members were not really out there trying to bring people in. So, yeah, these types of changes take place. So, we must find the way once again. We must find the truth, stick to it. We must look to ourselves and our brethren and see if we have not changed. You know, it's time for that self-evaluation from 2 Corinthians 13 and 5. And we must get back to the Bible ways and make sure we're doing those things. and realize, yeah, a lot of people don't want the Bible ways. Well, they're going to have to stand before God and explain that to God, because we cannot take that chance to drop the Bible ways just to make sure we have a lot of numbers in our churches. So consider those thoughts. Yeah, maybe I stepped on some toes, and maybe you can open up your eyes and realize, yeah, that's what's been happening. Especially us old timers, we're going to realize the changes that have taken place. Young people won't know this. They may not recognize that anything because they just really haven't been paying attention. But may we all work to help each other see that we cannot change the church, and the church will never be changed as far as God is concerned, but yet the people do change. We must realize that. All right, folks, that's our lesson for today. Consider these thoughts and really pay attention to them. Share this message with others, because a lot of people need to hear this message. And so realize that these changes have taken place. And so, Lord willing, we'll be back again tomorrow with another lesson. All right, bye-bye for now.